The chandelier light in the Jefferson Hotel ballroom threw tiny stars across the crystal when my father lifted the microphone and smiled the way a surgeon smiles before a cut. "Costumes are for children," he said, voice warm enough to sound like a joke and cold enough to sting. My daughter wore a dress today, not that pretend uniform that embarrasses this family. A fragile laughter skittered around the tables. I felt it land on my shoulders like confetti made of glass. The photographer looked to him for guidance, and he flicked 2 fingers, a small command: "Do not capture the uniform in family shots." The usher, who had just shown me to the head table, bent close and whispered that there had been a change, then guided me away past roses and place cards with perfect calligraphy toward a round near the service door where plates clattered and steam rose from chafers. A draft from the kitchen lifted the hem of my dress blues, and I steadied the fabric, steadying my breath with it. Aunt Marlene breezed by and leaned to my ear. "Did you buy those ribbons online, honey?" she said, the way some women ask if you got a sale on lamps. The women at her table laughed softly, pitying and pleased. I pressed my palms flat against the linen and counted the beats in my wrists the way I had counted radio checks through sand and night. Across the room, the videographer tracked a slow pan over laughing faces. Everyone glowed in gold. I could feel the camera avoid me the way eyes avoid a spill. My father raised his glass. "To achievement that is real, to titles that are earned to work you can measure." He did not say my name. He did not need to. Conversation swelled again, bright and careless, and in that noise I heard the small sounds that mattered more. The scrape of an extra chair added to a cousin's table, while mine stayed 1 seat short, the hush that falls when a group chat pings, and a row of faces read it at the same time, the click of a ring against a stem as my brother tapped and glanced at me without seeing me at all. I focused on posture, on shoulders, back, and chin level, on the quiet dignity that had carried me through dust and heat through the long middle of days when nothing went right except the way we held the line. I thought of my mother looking down at her napkin, folding corners into a tiny boat. I thought of the first time my father told me service was for people without ambition, and how I went running until my lungs tasted iron so I would not answer. I thought of the men and women who had handed me headsets with trembling fingers, and how we found the channel every time. Someone brushed my sleeve. The best man, Marcus Hale, eyes steady, jaw tight, the same look he had worn in a place where the night hummed with distance and danger. He nodded once, not for show, not for comfort, just recognition. Before I could breathe into that small mercy, my father spoke again. "Family deserves honesty," he said. "Tonight is not for theater." The band fell quiet. The ballroom stilled. Somewhere a saucer rang as a spoon was set down too hard. The MC froze like a statue with a smile. I could feel my pulse in my ears fast but level the way it goes when the thing you have trained for arrives. Then the sound that cut the room in half happened. Marcus dropped his phone. It hit the parquet with a clean crack and skittered under the band riser. He did not flinch. He did not apologize. He stepped forward, boots, square shoulders aligned, and brought his hand up with a precision that pulled the oxygen from the air. "Captain Cole, ma'am." The words were not loud. They did not need to be. They moved through the ballroom like a current, through sequins and satin, through polished shoes and polished resentments, and they settled on my father's face, where the smile did not know yet what to do. 2 guests stood with him, men whose hair had gone gray above straight backs, and their hands rose in the same clean line. Across the room, Colonel Whitaker, a quiet man in a simple suit, lifted his chin a fraction and gave a single approving nod that said more than any speech. The MC's practiced patter died on his tongue. Glasses hung in the air mid-toast as if the room itself had been paused by a remote control. I did not move. I did not argue. I let the silence do what truth does when it is finally given a path. The steward near the kitchen door shifted, caught between duty and attention, and then even he stilled. The videographer swung the lens toward Marcus almost by instinct, then toward me. then toward my father, hunting for the center of gravity and finding it held still. I could hear the phone still vibrating softly under the riser, like a trapped insect. I thought about the map of wires and call signs that had once stretched across a hostile night, and how we had sent a voice into the dark and waited for an answer, and how the answer had come because the circuit held. I looked at my father. He looked at the salute the way a man looks at a language he never bothered to learn. For a heartbeat, I saw something unfamiliar in his eyes, not regret, not yet, but the sudden knowledge that the story he had curated could not contain this moment. Marcus held the salute until protocol and respect were satisfied, then lowered it with the same care and stepped back. The band did not play. The guests did not whisper. Somewhere near the doors, a child asked a question in a whisper and was shushed by a mother who could not look away. I took a breath that did not shake. I placed my fingertips on the edge of the table so I could feel wood and linen and the steady world beneath performance. I did not thank anyone. I did not need to. The moment had already spoken. If you were me standing inside a silence like a held note while family and strangers waited to be told how to feel, would you bow your head and make yourself small for their comfort? Or would you stand straight and let quiet justice do the speaking? I used to think the small insults did not matter, that if I stayed calm long enough, the weather in my family would change. But the older I get, the more I understand that a toxic family does not need storms, only tiny cuts that never stop. The first cut landed in something as normal as the family group chat. It had been called Cole Family Wedding until one afternoon it refreshed, and the new name stung my eyes. Someone had renamed it to the clerk, not Elena, not Captain Cole, just the clerk. When I scrolled up, I saw Gerald had posted a meme about women in uniform serving coffee and stapling papers. No one corrected him. No one defended me, not even my mother. I tried to laugh, but my chest tightened in the same quiet way it had when I stood outside the wire in Syria and waited for radio to return from a patrol. Silence is sometimes the loudest sound in the world. The next week, the wedding invitations arrived. I opened mine in my apartment near West Broad Street and saw every name in a gold script. Logan and Cole families. Under that, the bridal party. Under that, extended family. At the very bottom, in a smaller font, was my name. No rank, no title. It felt like an erasure carved politely. I told myself I was overreacting until I saw the seating chart and found myself at the corner assigned for kids, an overflow. I had not sat with children since I came home from deployment, but my father believed nothing about military service belonged in public view. When I was commissioned through ROTC at VCU in 2019, he skipped the ceremony. When I pinned First Lieutenant in 2021, he texted a thumbs-up emoji. When I made captain in 2024, he told the waitress at dinner that women got promoted quickly because the Army needed diversity. I stayed quiet that evening because my mother's shoulders curved in fear every time he raised his voice. We ate at a restaurant in Short Pump. It was supposed to be a simple family dinner, but soon he started telling the waiter that I only handled paperwork and spreadsheets. Women go to the military to file folders and run errands, he said, and the waiter laughed politely, because what else could he do? I kept tasting metal in my mouth. Logan squeezed my hand under the table and whispered, "Let it go." But part of me knew letting it go was how the betrayal grew roots. The small things piled up slowly until one day they were not small. A twist arrived without warning. The wedding planner accidentally CC'd me on an email thread meant only for Gerald and the venue. I opened it on my phone in the parking lot of Kroger and felt my stomach drop. He wrote that uniforms should not appear in any official photographs because they make the event look tacky. He asked the photographer to crop out any military symbols if they accidentally appeared in the background. He ended the note with a smiley face. I stared at the email. Heather took screenshots, saved them in a folder, and for the first time in my life, I realized I was building story financial receipts. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I wanted proof that I was not imagining betrayal. I titled the file Receipts for Respect. Inside, I placed screenshots, messages, comments, and every moment someone pretended I was less than what I had earned. A part of me felt ashamed for keeping these digital fragments, yet another part felt relief because truth deserved witnesses. The military runs on communication. Comms kept us alive in Syria in 2023. I never talk about the details because nothing classified belongs in a story like this, but I can say I carried a radio until my shoulders ached, and I learned that the people who hear you are the ones who value your existence. I kept the rank quietly. I kept my patch tucked inside the jacket of my dress blues. I did not brag. I did not advertise. I simply tried to be the daughter who came home and helped. Still, the family betrayal kept growing. My brother Tyler posted a joke on Facebook with a picture of a costume store and captions about buying medals on the internet. Aunts and cousins left laughing emojis. One aunt messaged me privately and suggested I not wear the uniform at the ceremony because other guests might feel uncomfortable. She said some people had lost relatives in the service and did not want reminders. I replied politely that I understood, but deep down something cracked. Wearing the uniform was never about glory. It was about respect for those who did not return. The darkest night of my deployment still wakes me up sometimes, and the only thing that calms me is the knowledge that our comms stayed alive the entire time. People made it home to their families because signals did not die. That is real work. That is not paper. In the quiet of my apartment, I opened my laptop and changed my airdrop name to Captain Cole Official Photos. It was a small micro-revenge, just a whisper of defiance, but I knew anyone trying to share pictures at the wedding would see that name appear on their screen. The military teaches steady hands. It teaches quiet resilience. I learned early that dignity over money is sometimes the only currency that matters. Meanwhile, Gerald kept planning the wedding as if I were a shadow at the edge. He told the decorator not to place any flags or symbols near the main aisle. He told the pastor to avoid mentioning service in gratitude speeches. He told my mother that I should dress like a normal woman because uniforms attract attention. My mother did not fight him. I do not blame her. Years of living with a controlling man can fold a soul into silence. I saw that in Syria, too, when locals looked at the ground instead of speaking. The worst part of betrayal is when it becomes routine. I went running near the James River one morning to clear my head. The water moved steadily under the bridge, and I tried to breathe the way my therapist taught me after deployment. My chest hurt with a slow pressure. I realized the family I loved would never be proud of me. They would never see my service. They would never accept my rank. Yet I kept showing up. I kept telling myself that a wedding might heal something cracked. I was wrong. A week later, Gerald added a new rule. The seating chart would remain unchanged. I would stay at the kids' and overflow table. When I asked why, he said guests with real careers should sit near the center. The words hit me harder than mortar reports. Real careers. Signal officers who keep soldiers alive apparently do not qualify. I closed my mouth and nodded because sometimes survival means no sudden movement. That night, I added more screenshots to Receipts for Respect. Logan asked if I wanted to confront my father, but I shook my head. Revenge emotional is a slow burn. Quiet justice is patient. Family, betrayal, karma arrives when the truth has enough weight to sink a room. I waited and counted breaths. The planner apologized again for the CC mistake. She said she admired my service. She said she wished my family saw me the way strangers did. I did not know how to answer, so I thanked her and told her I would still wear the uniform. When I hung up, I stood in front of the mirror and looked at the gold bars on my shoulders. I remembered the radio static clearing in a desert night when a patrol called us home. I remembered a private crying when he heard his wife say their baby was born. I remembered men breathing because comms did not fail. I pressed my palms on the sink and promised myself that I would not be erased. People who watch revenge stories often ask when the turning point comes, when the quiet heart finally bends into steel. For me, that moment arrived not with shouting, but with stillness. As I organized the screenshots, as I saw my own evidence lined up like coordinates, I felt something settle inside. I was done pretending. I was done bowing. If my family wanted me to disappear, they would fail. The story was not over. It had not even begun. If you have ever experienced family betrayal so deep you had to save receipts for your own dignity, then you already understand the silence before the storm. The rehearsal dinner was supposed to be the calm before the celebration, yet from the moment I stepped into the restaurant in Chaco Slip, I felt the familiar weight of being unwelcome. The place was warm with soft lights and polished wood families laughing at their tables, but our group carried a different kind of energy. Gerald had chosen a long table in the center, and when Logan and I arrived, the first thing I saw was that my name card had been placed sideways at the very edge, half hanging off. I quietly fixed it and sat down. The servers poured wine for everyone but skipped my glass. At first I assumed it was a mistake, but then I saw Gerald wave his hand and whisper something. The server hesitated and moved on. My chest tightened, but I stayed composed. When the appetizers came out, Gerald rose with his glass raised high. The restaurant quieted around us. He cleared his throat dramatically as if announcing an award. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "in this family we have real titles and real accomplishments. Some people in this room have written books, served on boards, led companies, and built reputations." Then he glanced at me with a smirk. "Others, well, some just play dress-up." The table burst into polite laughter, but the sound stuck like bones in my throat. I kept my eyes lowered, counting my breaths, the way I had been trained to manage panic under pressure. The MC stood near the podium, holding the small script where he was supposed to mention my service. I had seen the draft earlier. It was short and respectful. But Gerald leaned in and whispered before the MC could speak. The man nodded quickly and flipped to a different page. There would be no mention of who I was or what I had done. When the server made another pass with wine, Gerald spoke loudly this time. "Do not pour for her. The military forbids certain people from drinking. She knows the rules." That laughter came again, uglier this time. My mother shifted uncomfortably, wanting to say something, but fear clenched her silence. She looked at her plate as though hiding inside the pattern of the porcelain might protect her. Tyler was busy on his phone, snapping photos of the table and making smug faces. A minute later, my notifications started buzzing. I checked discreetly. He had posted a picture of a costume shop with medals on a plastic board. The caption said, "2-day shipping, real war hero stuff." Cousins and distant relatives left laughing emojis and comments like, "Looks legit," and "Can I borrow that for Halloween?" I could feel heat rising under my collar. It was not anger at first, but humiliation, the kind that sinks into your bones and makes it hard to breathe. A woman on the other side of the table leaned toward her husband and whispered, "I told you she bought those online." The humiliation was a living thing circling the table like smoke. Logan reached for my hand, but I pulled away softly. Some pain must be stood alone. Across the table, I saw Marcus watching me. He was not in uniform, just a fitted shirt and black tie, but there was a stillness in his posture that no civilian man carries. He had been under my command in Syria in 2023. He had seen the worst and still stood. We had not planned to highlight our connection. We wanted a quiet wedding. But now his eyes held a silent question. "Do you want me to intervene?" I gave the smallest shake of my head. Not yet. The rehearsal moved on awkwardly. The MC stumbled through a generic speech. People clapped softly. The food arrived, but no one looked at me directly. I kept hearing Gerald's words repeating in my head. Real titles. Dress up. The irony was sharp enough to cut. I had never once demanded respect. I had never once boasted about service. I simply wore what I earned. And somehow that was the thing they could not stand. During dessert, Tyler posted another photo, a close-up of random medals with the caption, "My sister's military career in one picture." The comments were even worse this time. I felt my pulse thudding, but anger in the military is slow and cold, not reckless. I excused myself, walked to the restroom, locked a stall, and opened my phone. I gathered screenshots of Tyler's posts and the comments. Then, with calm precision, I filed a misinformation report directly to the platform and attached the images of my real awards. I added a note stating that defamation against service members violates policy. 20 minutes later, his post disappeared. When he checked his phone and realized it, his face flushed bright red. His friends began texting him, asking what happened. He looked confused, embarrassed, and suddenly very quiet. That was my micro-revenge. Small, quiet, controlled. I did not need to yell. I let the truth do the work. When I returned to the table, Gerald lifted his glass again. To family, he said loudly as if nothing had happened. To dignity and good upbringing. To knowing your place. The words were knives wrapped in sugar. A few distant relatives looked uncomfortable now. Some had seen Tyler's post vanish. Some had noticed the bartender avoiding my side of the table. A crack had appeared in the carefully built wall of lies. Marcus leaned closer to Logan and murmured something. Logan nodded. I knew what they were thinking. Soldiers are trained to move quietly until there is no other choice. My mother finally spoke. Her voice was small but steady. Gerald enough, but he waved her away like a fly. It is just a joke, Diane. She needs thicker skin. That sentence triggered a memory so sharp it made my eyes blur. A night in Syria when a young specialist shook after hearing distant fire. Someone told him to grow thicker skin. I pulled him aside, handed him water, and told him that fear does not mean weakness. It means you are human. I remembered his face when he returned safely after months of missions. He hugged me and said thank you for not making me feel small. Yet here, in this fancy restaurant, surrounded by people who shared my blood, I was treated as if I were nothing. The humiliation kept building. Gerald called for a group photo. Everyone gathered near the fountain. I walked forward, but he lifted his hand sharply. We need the main family first, he said. You can join after. My mother hesitated, uncertain where to stand. The photographer tried to wave me in, but Gerald moved between us. It is better for the aesthetic, he said coldly. The word aesthetic hit harder than any insult. He cared more about his image than his daughter. He cared more about presentation than truth. They took picture after picture. I stepped back, pulse in my ears. When the photographer finally gestured for me to join, Gerald muttered something about keeping uniforms out of official frames. My throat burned, but I walked into the photo anyway. I had every right to exist in that space. The photographer looked at me with apologetic eyes and clicked the shutter. The dinner wound down. People collected their coats. Gerald shook hands like a politician after a speech. Tyler disappeared early, still embarrassed by his vanished post. That small win did not erase the pain, but it reminded me that truth has quiet power. In the parking lot, the air was cool. Marcus leaned against his car and waited while the rest of the families drove away. When Logan and I approached, he nodded respectfully. I did not say much. He simply asked, "Do you want this to stop?" I answered honestly. I want the truth to stand. Nothing more. He nodded again. No salute, no dramatic gesture. Just a silent promise of loyalty, earned in places my family would never understand. I knew then that humiliation might be the first drop, but it would not be the last word. You want truth and closure. Sometimes you need the world to see who is lying. Sometimes humiliation is only the beginning of a revenge story. The morning of the ceremony should have been peaceful, but the first thing that greeted me when I stepped into the bridal preparation room was Aunt Marlene waving a paper coupon like a flag of shame. She marched toward me with a theatrical sigh, holding out a discount slip for a local alterations shop. The coupon said, "Fix your seams for less," and she pressed it into my palm with a smile that carried no kindness. "You should get that shoulder mended so you do not look embarrassing in pictures," she whispered loudly enough for every bridesmaid to hear. My uniform was perfectly inspected the night before, pressed, and lint rolled, yet she treated me like a child who had shown up in wrinkled clothes. I folded the coupon once, then calmly placed it on the table, every muscle in my body quiet. "It is fine, Aunt Marlene," I said. "Dress blues are built to withstand more than a photograph." Her eyebrows arched and she huffed away, muttering something about stubborn girls. I watched her reflection in the mirror, wondering why some relatives feel entitled to throw darts at the one person who never throws them back. The makeup artist beside me pretended not to hear, but her sympathetic look said everything. She knew humiliation when she heard it. A few minutes later, the MC slipped into the room holding a clipboard. His voice wavered as he approached. "I have a quick update from the groom's father," he said, shifting nervously. He handed me a revised copy of his ceremony script. The words hit my chest like a cold gust. The line that mentioned my military service was crossed out. It now said, "Elena will escort her mother to her seat." Nothing more. No mention of rank, no acknowledgement of what I had done or who I was. The MC apologized. He said Gerald told him that talking about the military might create division or make civilians uncomfortable. I stared at the ink crossing out my truth and felt something freeze inside me. I had led soldiers in the desert, held comms under pressure, brought people home, and now my identity was erased with a pen to keep guests comfortable. I handed the script back calmly. "I do not need a title," I said. "I only need space to stand." The MC nodded and left quietly, guilt pressing on his shoulders. I opened my purse and checked my folder, Receipts for Respect. Part of me already knew that the disrespect was not an accident but a plan. When I finally walked into the ceremony hall to check seating, I saw my name on the place card. Except it was not my name. Someone had written Ellen Cole in shiny silver ink. My first name spelled wrong. My last name bent as if it were something disposable. A few guests nearby laughed when they saw me staring at the card. "Do not get upset," someone said. "It is just a joke. A joke repeated too many times becomes a weapon." I picked up the card, turned it over, then set it down again. My back stayed straight. The hurt settled beneath the ribs, quiet but sharp. When Tyler walked by, I caught the smirk he tried to hide. He loved these petty humiliations because they made him feel bigger. The irony was that his entire world existed inside a phone screen, and mine existed in places where men had to trust you with their lives. As I stood near the stage, I heard someone say, "She is too sensitive. Why can she not just laugh about it?" They did not understand that laughter is not required when someone keeps stealing your name. That was when Marcus approached, not loudly, not dramatically, just close enough for me to hear. He stood straight, his posture still carrying a soldier's quiet discipline. He looked at my uniform, eyes narrowing just slightly. His gaze shifted to my shoulder and then to the inside lining of my jacket, where a small hidden patch rested. I had removed my ribbons for the ceremony to avoid one more argument, but the small patch tucked discreetly could not be erased. "Echo 6, he whispered. A single question shaped like a memory. I met his eyes and nodded just once. He had recognized the call sign from Syria. His face changed, not with shock, but with respect, the kind of respect that comes from shared danger and survival. For a moment, I felt anchored again, like a radio signal reconnecting after static. He leaned close, his voice low. "Do you need me to say anything?" I shook my head calmly. "Not yet." Just knowing someone in this room saw the whole truth stripped half the weight off my chest. A few minutes later, CPT Rivera passed by dressed in a civilian suit, but with unmistakable military bearing. She squeezed my shoulder gently. "Remember," she whispered, "no talk of AAR or classified details. If anyone pushes you, just speak in leadership and valor terms." She was there as a friend, not on duty, but she knew the lines better than anyone. Her presence steadied me. In that room full of petty whispers and hidden insults, having two people who knew my real story felt like oxygen. The bridal party bustled in and out, fixing flowers, retouching makeup, practicing smiles. In the background, I heard bridesmaids gossiping in low voices. Some wondered if my uniform was real. Others questioned why I was allowed to wear it at all. Their ignorance annoyed me, but it also amused me. They had no idea that dress blues are permitted at formal events and that every stripe and bar on mine was earned. My patience was not weakness. It was strategy. Then came the smallest, sharpest moment of the day. While the coordinator checked lighting, the portable Wi-Fi router flickered on. Guests began trying to connect. Phones buzzed. Laughter rippled across the room. People started whispering. I saw the network name appear across half a dozen screens. Respect Capt. Cole. No announcement, no explanation. Just a quiet reminder floating in digital space, undeniable and unerasable. It was my micro-revenge. Not loud, not cruel, but pointed. Anyone who tried to get Wi-Fi would have to read my ranks spelled correctly and maybe question the versions of me they had accepted. One bridesmaid turned her phone toward another. "Why does it say Captain?" she asked. Before anyone could answer, I heard someone scoff. Probably something she typed to make herself look important. The coordinator announced we had to move to the courtyard for final instructions. People gathered their things and filed out. As I walked past Gerald, he did not look at me, but I caught the stiffness in his jaw. He had seen the Wi-Fi name. He knew exactly what I had done. Good, I thought. Let him feel a fraction of the humiliation he poured on me. Outside, the air smelled like fresh-cut grass and spring wind. The ceremony chairs lined up beautifully beneath the morning light. Logan found me and rested his forehead against mine. "You okay?" he whispered. I nodded. I had learned in the military that reclaiming respect does not begin with shouting. It begins with refusing to disappear. As the efficient practice cues and guests found their places, I looked once more at the misspelled card with Ellen Cole. I removed it quietly and replaced it with a blank one. Then I wrote my name myself in steady dark ink. Captain Elena Cole. No apology, no shame. Some battles are loud. Others are a pen stroke. If reclaiming respect starts anywhere, it starts with refusing a wrong name. The ceremony had not even begun when the next layer of humiliation wrapped itself around me like a slow tightening rope. Guests were still arriving, adjusting jackets, smoothing dresses, smiling for photos, yet under all that charm there was a quiet cruelty moving through the room. I stood near the archway watching the photographer line people up for family pictures. At first it seemed normal. Couples posed, grandparents held children, cousins laughed. Then I saw Gerald gesture sharply toward the photographer and point directly at me. His voice was low but firm. "Make sure she is cropped out of any primary family frames." The photographer hesitated, glancing nervously in my direction, but Gerald insisted again. The photographer's eyes filled with embarrassment as he walked to me. He murmured that the father of the groom preferred smaller groupings. I could feel the insult like a physical blow, but I stayed silent. I knew the pattern. Erasure disguised as formality. Logan, still standing with his cousins, clenched his jaw, but I gave him a subtle shake of my head. This was my humiliation. I would carry it with steady shoulders. When it was finally time for the formal lineup, everyone gathered again. I stepped toward the group, yet Gerald touched the photographer's arm and whispered something. The photographer nodded and raised the camera without calling my name. People smiled as if everything was perfect. I remained outside the frame, watching the flash burn across their faces while mine was silently removed. The usher arrived to guide people to seats. I was supposed to sit near the front, with immediate family directly behind my mother. Instead, the usher leaned close and apologized. He said Gerald instructed him to move me again this time to a far corner near a pillar. The small square of floor was so cramped I could barely straighten my legs. It was as if he wanted the entire room to forget I existed. Tyler walked past carrying a stack of programs. He bent slightly and whispered just loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "She wears fake insignia. Probably bought them the same place she got those medals online." The couple beside him laughed. Another guest muttered that some people will do anything for attention. Their words floated like poison in the air, invisible, but deadly. I stared at the floor for a moment, remembering the weight of a headset against my ears in Syria, hearing the crackle of a distant unit calling for confirmation. Nothing in this beautiful ballroom could compare to the reality of what those symbols meant. They were not decorations. They were proof of nights survived. I looked up and saw Marcus watching with the quiet alertness of someone who had once stood under my command. He saw everything without saying a word. A few minutes later, as guests settled and music hummed through the speakers, he moved beside me. He held out a small black USB drive. On it was a short clip, non-classified, nothing secret, just a recorded message from a soldier who once thanked me for keeping comms stable during a chaotic night. Marcus also carried a challenge coin scratched around the edges from his deployment. He placed it in my palm and closed my fingers around it, just in case he whispered, not to show off, not to humiliate anyone, just evidence that truth existed if someone tried to bury it. He looked toward the back of the room where Colonel Whitaker stood, chatting quietly with Logan's uncle. The colonel was not in uniform, but anyone with military eyes would recognize his posture. If things escalated, if lies grew too bold, credible witnesses were present. My dignity did not need volume. It simply needed truth nearby. While the ceremony coordinator gathered everyone's attention, the MC approached me again. He tucked something into his jacket pocket and leaned close. I figured you might want this safe. It was the original version of the ceremony script, the one that mentioned my role in the service. I met his eyes and nodded. If at any moment I became erased again, there would be a way to pull the truth back into the light. Micro-revenge is not always a slap. Sometimes it is a quiet arrangement, a backup plan, a seed of reality waiting for the perfect moment. My mother found me a few steps later. Her hands trembled slightly as she straightened the sleeve of my uniform. Her voice was low and careful. I did not approve of what he is doing. You deserve better. It was the closest thing to defiance I had ever heard from her. I covered her hand with mine. It is all right, I said. She looked at the seating chart and winced when she saw where I had been placed. Let me fix this, she whispered. I shook my head. Let him show the world who he is. People reveal themselves best when they think no one is watching. More guests arrived. Conversations flowed. Laughter filled the hall. The pianist switched to a softer melody. From a distance, it all looked perfect. But perfection is often just decoration, laid over rot. The florist adjusted the arch of flowers while the officiant tested the microphone. I stayed in my corner posture, straight eyes forward. At some point, I heard a bridesmaid giggle. She said aloud that I must feel stupid standing there in a costume. Another replied that women in the army always exaggerate. I closed my eyes for a moment and pictured the night sky over the desert the way stars looked when the world felt endless and dangerous. In the military, you learn to withstand pressure without breaking. You learn to breathe correctly even when your body shakes. I opened my eyes again. The humiliation had not destroyed me. It had sharpened me. Logan eventually walked toward my corner, defying the seating chart completely. If you sit in the shadows, I sit in the shadows, he said softly. His loyalty eased the tightness in my chest. But before he could pull a chair beside me, Gerald barked across the room. Logan family table is up front. Do not make a scene. Logan stared at him with a calm so cold it felt like a blade. I am sitting with my wife, he said. Gerald's face reddened, but Logan did not move. Dignity over money, dignity over image, dignity over control. That moment was small, but to me it felt enormous. I held the challenge coin in my palm and felt the carved edges press lightly into my skin. Humiliation continued to ripple through the room, but something steadier was forming underneath it. Quiet justice works like that. It begins as a whisper. The ceremony coordinator called for guests to silence their phones. People reached to switch settings. A few tried to connect to the venue Wi-Fi one last time. When the network list appeared, I heard short, confused laughs. Respect capped coal. The name hovered across dozens of screens. Gerald whipped around, scanning the room as if trying to find who caused it. Tyler scowled. A few cousins exchanged uncomfortable looks. They could not delete my rank from that network. They could not stop strangers from seeing it. I did not need to shout. My place was here in uniform in plain sight. The ceremony was minutes away. The sky outside glowed with late afternoon light filtering through the tall windows. I smoothed my jacket again and steadied my breathing. I was not the child they tried to shame. I was not the clerk they mockingly renamed. I had earned every bar, every stripe, every ounce of respect. Dignity over money, dignity over approval, dignity over the need to please anyone who tried to shrink me. Sometimes the greatest act of revenge is simply staying in the room, keeping your shoulders straight, holding your ground when someone else wishes you would vanish. That was how the rope loosened. Not with noise, but with self-possession. If people wanted to erase me, they would fail. You can crop a photograph. You cannot crop the truth. The dressing room smelled of hairspray and peony, sweet and sharp. The door clicked behind my mother and me. She went to the far mirror and pretended to fix an invisible strand. Her eyes in the glass were bright with worry and slid away from mine as if contact might summon a storm. I set my cover on a chair and touched the collar of my dress blues. The fabric was cool where the air conditioner breathed. Under the weight of the morning, it felt heavier than usual, as if unsaid words were stitched into the seams. Outside, the hallway was busy with cheerful voices. "Your father means well," my mother said, then stopped. The lie hung between us like a curtain. "Do you want water?" I shook my head and unhooked the top button. In the mirror, my open collar looked like surrender. I slid my fingers to the next button and paused. "Breathe in for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. We can put on the green dress," she said. "It is very pretty. We can avoid the fight." Her voice tried to soothe, and instead it pushed. I thought of the kids and overflow table, the misspelled place card the photographer told to crop me out the usher, steering me to a pillar, Tyler whispering that my insignia were fake. My pulse climbed. I slipped one sleeve off and the room tilted. She reached for the hanger. The door opened and a flower girl peeked in. Cheeks pink from running. She stopped when she saw me half out of uniform. "Are you a superhero?" she asked. I froze with my arm half in the sleeve. A laugh and a sob collided in my throat. "Not a superhero," I said. "Someone who tries to help people get home." She nodded. "My mom says heroes do not always wear capes. Sometimes they wear clothes with shiny buttons." She lifted her basket. "I want to throw these right so the path looks pretty. Your path will be perfect," I said. She slipped out, leaving the door soft against the latch. The room felt different. My mother stood with the green dress in her hands. Her eyes were wet in the way that means an old decision has cracked. "I am afraid of him," she said. "I have been afraid a long time." I eased the sleeve back on. I fastened the top button again. The tiny click of metal through cloth sounded louder than the piano outside. "You will make it worse," she whispered. Maybe I said, or maybe I will make it true. "I do not know how to stand between you," she said. "I do not know how to protect both of you. You do not have to stand between us," I said. "You only have to stand with what is right." Her mouth trembled. "I am not brave." "You are here," I said. Sometimes that is courage. My phone lay face down beside a glass of water with lemon. A message notification waited on an old thread. I tapped. The note was from a sergeant who had rotated months ago. "You kept comms alive," it read. "We made the pickup because you did not leave the headset. We still talk about that night." I listened to the tent walls breathe. "You said hold the line, and we did. Thank you." I felt the words settle in me like a stake driven into earth. I set the phone down and looked at my reflection. Collar closed again, shoulders squared again, calm on my face. Outside, the hallway thinned as guests took their seats. Somewhere, Gerald was resetting the world to fit his story. Somewhere, Tyler was crafting jokes. Somewhere, a lens was being framed to please a man who feared what he could not control. My mother moved closer and smoothed the fabric at my shoulder, the way she did when I was a child with a scraped knee, insisting I was fine. "I am sorry," she said. "I should have told him to stop long ago." "It is not yours to fix," I said. "He chose this. I choose this." She lifted my cover from the chair and offered it with both hands, as if passing a fragile heirloom. "Thank you," I said. I adjusted the brim and checked the angle. The uniform settled on my frame, less like armor and more like honesty. I remembered a night under a sky crowded with stars. We listened for a voice in the static, and then there it was, thin and far, but there. We answered and kept answering. Duty is sometimes only that. Keep answering. I pulled in a slow breath. In for 4. Hold. Out for 4. My heartbeat steadied. The weight of the morning shifted from my shoulders to the floor. A bridesmaid poked her head in and said the officiant was ready. My mother still looked frightened, but behind the fear, a small light flickered. "Be safe," she said. "Safe is not the word for days like this," I said. "True is." I opened the vanity drawer and found a hotel sewing kit. I did not need it, but I took one clear button and slipped it into my pocket as a reminder not of fixing, of fastening, of the choice to hold fast. I opened the door. The hallway air felt cooler. Voices swelled and stilled beyond the corner. I straightened my spine and felt the coin Marcus had given me press against my palm where I had tucked it beneath the glove. Not a trophy, a witness. I walked forward. Each step was deliberate, not toward a fight, but toward a line I had already drawn. Let them mock. Let them crop. Let them move chairs and whisper about fakes. I would not remove the truth to make liars comfortable. I would not trade dignity for a smoother evening. I would not barter a life of service for an easier photo. At the corner, I paused and looked down at the polished floor. It held a faint reflection of the ceiling lights, a path of small suns leading toward the ballroom. The message pulsed again in my mind. You kept comms alive. I lifted my chin and felt the collar settle, like a promise I was willing to keep. I stepped into the light with my back straight and my voice quiet inside my chest. Emotional resilience is not a shout. It is a button, pushed through cloth and set. It is the decision to keep the line open until everyone who needs to get home has the chance. The music swelled. I did not look for permission. I walked on steady, ready to let the next part happen in its own time. Today. The ballroom was loud again by the time I reached my seat, loud in the way people get when they believe the worst is already over. Forks clicked. Champagne fizzed the string quartet, slid into another polite melody. Gerald sat at the head table with the posture of a man who believed the world still bent around him. His smile was measured and smug, the kind used by lawyers who think they have already won the case before opening their mouths. The officiant cleared his throat and asked for quiet, but Gerald lifted his hand, and everyone hushed faster than if the music had stopped. He rose glass in hand, eyes sweeping the room until they landed on me. "There she is," he said, the family actress in costume again. His tone was playful on the surface, yet sharp underneath. The guests gave polite laughs, the kind that are half nervous and half cruel. My stomach tightened. He went on. "Today is a celebration of real achievement, real careers, real family." And then he looked directly at me and said, "Not pretend soldiers who play dress up because they could not cut it in the real world." Something cold opened inside my chest. A few guests coughed. Someone shifted their chair. Gerald smiled wider. The photographer raised the camera, but Gerald flicked his fingers to lower it. No need to capture the circus. Logan reached for my hand under the table, but I set my palm flat and still. My mother pressed a napkin between her fingers, folding and unfolding the corner again and again. I heard the click. Before I saw it happen, a small sharp sound of metal and glass hitting the floor. Marcus Hale's phone had fallen from his hand. The room went completely silent as he stepped forward from his seat. His boots pressed into the carpet without a sound. He stopped 2 feet from Gerald's chair. In one clean motion, he drew himself straight shoulders, square chin, tucked right palm cutting upward with precision. His voice was steady and carried through crystal and velvet like a bell. "Captain Cole, ma'am." Every word was shaped by discipline and respect. My heart thudded once like a fist against a door. Two men in the back rose to their feet without thinking, chairs scraping hands at their sides in a quiet show of recognition. They wore jackets, but I saw their posture and knew immediately. Former service or still in it did not matter. They knew the language of respect. Colonel Whitaker, seated near the groomsman, tipped his head a fraction, a gesture small in size but enormous in weight. Gerald stared at Marcus as if the room had suddenly changed shape, and he was the only one who did not understand how. "Sit down," he said. "This is not your place." Marcus did not blink. His salute held. I heard the faint vibration of his phone still on the floor, a soft buzzing against polished marble. The sound filled the silence like a heartbeat. The master of ceremonies took a step forward, confused, but CPT Rivera leaned in close and whispered something to him. MC cleared his throat. "The best man requests 30 seconds. Gerald barked a laugh. 30 seconds for what? A magic trick. But the room did not laugh with him this time. Something had shifted. Marcus dropped his salute as smoothly as he had raised it. He picked up his phone from the floor and placed it gently on the table beside him. He did not look at Gerald. He looked at me. "I would like to make a toast," he said. Gerald snapped, "We do not need a toast from you." Marcus lifted his glass. "It is not for you, it is for her." That small sentence cut the room open. He took a breath. "I served under Captain Cole in Syria. She was the officer in charge of our communications unit. She kept every channel clear even when the night shook and ears rang and the tent felt like it might collapse." He paused, letting the silence hold it. "We made our medevac because she kept the line alive. We knew we could trust her. She helped us get home." He did not give details. No classified reports, no names. Just truth shaped into simple sentences. The kind that leave no room for argument. My fingers curled against the tablecloth. I saw Tyler shift uncomfortably, the color draining from his face. A cousin dropped her fork. Aunt Marlene covered her mouth with a trembling hand. Gerald scoffed, "Unearned stories, borrowed valor, anyone can say anything." But his voice cracked on the last word, tiny but noticeable. Marcus lowered his glass. "I do not borrow stories, sir." The room stayed silent. Then one of the men in the back stepped forward and placed his palm against his chest. "Respect, ma'am," he said toward me. I felt heat rise behind my eyes, but I did not move, did not nod, did not speak. I let the moment stand on its own legs. The DJ looked at the MC. The MC looked at Rivera. Rivera gave the smallest nod. The DJ cut the music. The hush deepened. Logan finally spoke. He said it clearly, not loud, just certain. "Elena earned everything she wears. She does not need your permission to exist in her own wedding photographs." My mother's breath stuttered. She looked at me with the face of a woman who had waited too long to choose a side. Gerald tried to laugh again, but no sound came. His power came from an audience that agreed, and the audience was not agreeing anymore. Something fragile cracked. Tyler muttered medals are still fake. Marcus reached into his pocket with calm precision. He placed something on the table in front of him. A small coin kissed the wood with a soft, metallic tick. Not a huge object, nothing shiny, but every service member in the room recognized the weight of it. Colonel Whitaker rose from his seat. He walked to Marcus, picked up the coin, and read the markings. He nodded, once eyes sharp. Then he turned toward me. "Captain Cole, good to meet you." Gerald blinked like a man waking in the wrong story. "That is impossible," he said. "You are lying." But his voice was shrinking. The colonel ignored him. He faced the guests and said with professional calm, "This officer shows exceptional leadership in hostile conditions. Her soldiers speak for her because she earned that right the hard way." He returned the coin to Marcus, who simply lifted his glass once more and said thank you. The air moved differently then. Guests shifted. Whispered eyes turned away from Gerald. His authority was no longer the center point. Truth had cut the floor from under him. I waited for anger or triumph or something loud to fill my chest. Nothing came. Only stillness. only clarity. When the colonel sat again, he gave one last nod in my direction. It was tiny, like a bookmark slid quietly into a page, but I felt it like a hand on my shoulder. I stood, slowly. My chair barely made a sound. I placed both palms on the table and breathed once. I did not look at Gerald. I looked at my mother. She held my gaze and did not look away. When I spoke, my voice came out steady and low. I am proud to serve. That was all I said, small, measured, enough. Because sometimes truth does not need to shout. Sometimes closure arrives in the shape of a salute. The music did not come back right away. People tried to pretend the evening was still normal, but the silence had changed direction, like a wind that suddenly remembers where it is supposed to blow. Gerald remained standing for a moment too long, frozen in a pose that used to earn obedience. When he finally sat, it was not graceful. The chair legs scraped a small, harsh sound that made several heads turn. The first person to move toward me was the photographer, a thin man with silver hair and a camera strap worn smooth from years of work. His smile was tight with embarrassment. "I was instructed to avoid your uniform in the family shots," he whispered. That was incorrect. "May I retake those frames with you centered?" His voice trembled not with fear of me, but fear of his own conscience. "Yes," I said. His shoulders relaxed with relief. He adjusted the lights and cleared space near the window where golden evening light spilled across the carpet. Logan stood with me, his hand warm at my back. Guests shifted aside, creating a path that had not existed an hour ago. One woman in a dark blue dress looked at Gerald, then at me, and stepped away from his table entirely. It was not dramatic, just a quiet repositioning, but the meaning was sharp. Others followed. Conversations that had orbited around him slowed and drifted. The photographer began snapping a new series of shots. At one point, he lowered the camera and said, "You stand very still, Captain." "Years of practice," I replied. He nodded in soft respect. In the corner, Tyler recovered enough courage to speak. Though courage may not be the right word, he marched toward Marcus, chin out, pride dented. "Let me see that coin." Marcus arched an eyebrow without turning fully. "Why?" "To see if it is real." Marcus gave a patient sigh, barely audible. "You would not know the difference." Tyler bristled. "Try me." Marcus looked at him then, and the room leaned in without meaning to. His voice stayed polite. "Coins are not for display. They are given earned or exchanged. They speak a language of service. If you do not speak it, you cannot read it." Tyler reddened and muttered something under his breath, then backed away, bumping into a waiter who nearly dropped a tray of glasses. A small laugh rippled through the nearest table. It was not kind laughter, but it was deserved. People who had once avoided my gaze now nodded or whispered a quiet thank you. A retired Marine shook my hand and said, "My daughter is in the Air Force. You make me proud for her." My mother approached slowly, her steps careful. She placed her hand on my arm. "I am so sorry," she said again, but there was a new note in her voice, a thread of something stronger than fear. "You did nothing wrong," I said. "The problem was never you." She wiped at her eyes with the napkin she had shredded into frayed cloth. Across the room, someone held up a phone, then another, then several. The moment of the salute had been captured. The guests who filmed it did not gawk. They documented. Within minutes, I heard the quiet buzz of group chats. Facebook notifications chimed. Someone whispered Marcus's name. Someone else said Colonel. People moved in clusters, whispering about leadership service respect. Logan leaned close and said, "It is already spreading." I felt a strange calm settle in my chest. If truth wanted light, it would find it. I had spent years letting lies define me. Tonight, the lies looked small. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Gerald watching the phone screens with growing alarm. He stood abruptly and barked no recording. A guest with salt and pepper hair turned slowly and said, "You do not decide that tonight." Gerald's mouth snapped shut. The guests continued sharing clips. One woman held her phone close, listening to Marcus's voice. I did not hear the words, but I saw her eyes soften. She came to me. I have never seen someone stand so still while everyone tried to make them disappear, she said. You earned this moment. Thank you for serving. She squeezed my hand and left. The quartet began playing again, but this time the mood was different. People danced, laughed, toasted, but the center of gravity had shifted away from Gerald. He looked small at the head table's shoulders, hunched eyes darting. Tyler sat beside him, arms crossed, no longer loud. When dessert arrived, no one asked Gerald for a speech. No one invited Tyler to make a joke. Instead, guests asked me to join a photo, then another, then another. The photographer directed them with gentle firmness, making sure my uniform was visible. Logan kissed my forehead and whispered, "Look around. They are rewriting the room." At the end of the night, a man from our church tapped my shoulder. He looked uncomfortable, but not with me, with himself. We saw a post online, he said. Your brother shared something about your medals being fake. The church board asked him to remove it and post a correction. His voice held a hint of shame. I nodded. Thank you for telling me. He exhaled, relieved. We want the truth in our community. I appreciated that more than he knew. Later that week, a friend sent me a link. A small veterans group in Richmond had posted the wedding salute video. Its caption was simple. Respect where it is due. The comments were kind. Welcome home. Proud of you. Thank you for serving. Messages followed. Some from strangers, some from old classmates who had never understood why I joined the service at all. One message stood out. The board of a legal association was reconsidering Gerald's invitation to speak at an ethics panel. Complaints had arrived from 3 members who witnessed the wedding. The email used dry, professional language, but its meaning was crystal clear. Conduct unbecoming. Logan read it twice. He looked at me with a mix of surprise and satisfaction. You did not have to raise your voice, he said. The truth carried it for you. I thought of the coin, the salute, the stillness. Justice without hate. There is a special kind of justice in letting people correct themselves. That night, the house was quiet except for the hum of the dishwasher. I sat on the couch, feet tucked under my uniform jacket folded across my lap. The doorbell chimed once. When I opened it, the photographer from the wedding stood there with an envelope. I wanted you to have these prints first, he said. The best ones. He handed me a stack of photos. In each one, I stood centered, shoulders back, face calm. Not smiling, not scowling. Present. Seen. When he left, I spread the photos across the coffee table. Logan slid beside me and kissed my temple. You reclaimed the room without touching a single chair, he said. I nodded. Sometimes reclaiming respect is not a shout or a demand. It is standing still until the crowd realizes they are facing the wrong way. Reclaiming respect can be that quiet. It can be the moment a photographer asks forgiveness, or the moment a church asks for truth, or the moment a community of veterans says we see you. Truth and closure are not always loud. Sometimes a salute is enough. 3 days after the wedding, the doorbell rang while Logan was at work, and the house smelled like fresh coffee and lemon cleaner. I expected a delivery or one of the bridesmaids returning something she borrowed, but when I opened the door, my father stood there on the porch, hands in his pockets, shoulders hunched just enough to look smaller than usual. There was no car of his in sight, which meant he made someone drop him off, maybe because he wanted to look humble, maybe because he wanted pity. His voice tried to sound casual. May I come in? I stepped aside, not out of warmth, but because I wanted the conversation to finish without an audience. He walked to the living room and looked around as if searching for a weakness in the walls. Nice place, he said, as if that were a compliment instead of a judgment. I sat on the armchair, not the sofa. He remained standing. I heard you are popular online, he started. People are talking, videos, comments, the kind that spread. I said nothing. He cleared his throat. A community contract was canceled. They said the optics were not right. They need someone with integrity and influence. His voice sharpened. They think I disrespected the military. He lifted his hands in disbelief. I did not do anything wrong. The room stayed still. My father exhaled through his nose. "I need you to correct the narrative," he said. "You could make a post, maybe a photo with us together. Tell them you know your father supports the troops. You are good at words. A small endorsement will fix this. Just a simple PR gesture. Family helps family." That last line was tossed like bait on water. I watched his face. He expected persuasion to work because it always had. Instead, I walked to the kitchen counter and retrieved a single sheet of paper. I placed it between us on the coffee table. A checklist, clear print, black ink. My father frowned. "What is this?" I leaned back. "These are the terms for any contact regarding reputation or public statements. First item, a written apology posted on the church bulletin and your Facebook page stating you disrespected military service and were wrong." He blinked. Second, removal of every online post mocking my uniform or medals, including Tyler's comments with a statement clarifying that the information was false. Third, no financial requests or hints of sponsorship for 24 months. Not one. Not subtle. Not implied. Fourth, you will write a single sentence publicly or privately. I was wrong. A long silence filled the room. My father stared at the paper as if it were written in another language. "You are joking." "No, you are asking me to humiliate myself," he said. I answered calmly, "You already did that, only now the room noticed." He sat slowly on the couch. His hands trembled with controlled anger. "You got carried away. You let some soldiers play hero for you. You think this will last. They always get bored. People move on." I folded my hands. I do not need them to remember. I only need myself to stop forgetting who I am. He scoffed. "You want me to debase myself because you cannot handle a joke. This is childish." My voice stayed quiet. "It is boundaries." He stood again, pacing. "I am your father." "That means something." His tone shifted into a plea dressed as authority. "Help me fix this. We can show unity. You stand beside me at the next event, you smile, you say you forgive me. People love reconciliation stories. It will calm everything down. House is house. Blood is blood." He reached out, palm up, like an actor rehearsing charity. I did not move. The distance between us felt like a country border. I said softly, "I cut those ties the night you told me to leave my own wedding. You may choose your story, but you no longer choose mine." He stared at me, stunned that quiet words could weigh more than shouting. His eyes hardened. "So that is it. You are done." "Completely?" I nodded. "Completely." His jaw twitched. Then he used the weapon he always assumed would work. "If you do this, you are out of the will. No property. No inheritance." I walked to my laptop on the dining table, flipped it open, and brought up a folder titled Receipts for Respect. He watched confused. On the screen were screenshots of his messages, his instructions to the photographer, Tyler's defamation posts, witness statements from guests, and the video clips. "You threatened financial control," I said. "You threatened legacy, but you documented everything yourself. You created the record." He stepped back as if the screen were bright enough to blind. "Who else has this?" he asked. His voice cracked. "Enough people," I said. "People who believe in truth. You want to talk about inheritance. You are cutting yourself out." He opened his mouth, then shut it. The room hummed with the refrigerator's steady motor. The house did not bend to his presence. It did not shrink to make him feel tall. He looked suddenly tired, suddenly older. He dropped into the sofa, shoulders sagging, voice thin. "If your mother sees that she will—" His sentence trailed off. I closed the laptop gently. "I do not need revenge," I said. "I need safety. I need dignity. You giving interviews about ethics while mocking service does not create either." He swallowed hard. "What do you want from me?" I pointed to the checklist. "Start there." He stared at it as if the paper might bite. Then he stood and walked toward the door. Halfway out, he turned back. "One day you will regret choosing strangers over family." His voice carried bitterness and fear together. I answered, I did not choose strangers. I chose myself. The door clicked behind him. No slammed anger, just resignation. The silence afterward was warm, not cold. Logan came home an hour later. I told him everything, the checklist, the threat, the receipts. He leaned his forehead against mine. You did not break anything, he whispered. You only refused to be broken. That night, before bed, I opened the spreadsheet one more time and added a new line at the bottom. Status boundary enforced. Result peace. Sometimes dignity is not loud. Sometimes silent revenge is simply not signing the paper that tries to make you small again. Dignity over money. Truth over legacy. Respect over inheritance. This was the night I realized I had already inherited what mattered. My own voice. The morning air at the Virginia War Memorial tasted like cold stone and pine as the honor guard moved in slow precision. Families filled the seats, faces wrapped in scarves, coffee cups steaming, and the flags along the terrace snapped with November wind. I stood in the third row wearing my dress blues again, not for anyone's approval, but because the uniform finally felt like mine, not borrowed courage. Colonel Whitaker walked to the podium, silver hair calm voice posture like a carved pillar. On this Veterans Day, we acknowledge those who served and those who still carry the weight of service. He paused and looked toward me. Among us is Captain Elena Cole. Please step forward. My heart did not leap. It settled. The crowd shifted as I moved to the stage heels clicking on stone. I saw Logan's smiling hands in his pockets against the wind pride radiating from him like warmth. I also caught my mother's coat in the corner of my eye. She stood stiff beside Gerald, but a space separated them like a crack in old marble. The colonel held out a small challenge coin brushed gold with a Signal Corps emblem. No theatrics, only respect. For exemplary leadership under fire, he said. The citation was brief and clean because nothing classified could be spoken. He read from a letter written by a fellow soldier. She kept comms alive. I got home. That was all. The crowd exhaled as if someone had untied a knot. An older veteran in a faded bomber jacket shuffled up beside the railing. His voice shook with age and humor. We heard about the steel lily, he said. Hard to believe you are real. I smiled and his laugh cracked into the cold air. The heartbeat of the ceremony stayed quiet, dignified. No revenge shouted, no anger raised, just truth placed in the open like sunlight on ice. The MC at the podium cleared his throat and asked for a moment to thank those who built bridges between units, who saved lives the quiet way. He nodded toward me. Courage is not only bullets and charges. Sometimes it is a calm voice in a headset when everything is burning. Cameras flashed, but no one cropped me out. No one moved me to a corner. The world felt balanced for the first time in a long time. Then I saw Gerald. He stood with arms crossed, jaw tight, scanning the crowd to see who noticed him. My mother looked down at her hands. When the applause rose, she joined in, not looking at him, not asking his permission. Her claps were small but real, the kind a person makes when they decide to breathe for themselves. Tyler tried to step toward the stage. I saw him wave at the MC like he wanted the microphone. A security volunteer gently shook his head. Not today, sir. Tyler's face flushed red. He argued, but two other ushers guided him back to his seat. It should have been ridiculous, but instead, it felt like justice in a small, polite suit. After the coin presentation, people lined up to shake my hand. A woman whose son served in Afghanistan said thank you. A teenager with braces said, I want to be like you. A man from the local radio station asked if he could use the phrase, steel lily, in a story. I said yes. Logan reached me and pressed a small packet of hand warmers into my palm because my fingers had gone cold. His simple kindness felt like more decoration than any medal. Then I heard a familiar voice, quiet and trembling. Elena. I turned. My mother stood alone. Her scarf was crooked and her eyes were red. She whispered, I am sorry. Not loud, not for show. I believed her not because she convinced me, but because she did not reach for excuses. Gerald stood several feet behind her face, carved stone, refusing to move closer. I did not hug her. I did not punish her. I only nodded and said thank you for coming. That was enough. The ceremony closed with the honor guard folding the flag, and the trumpet played a slow note that vibrated in the chest. People bowed heads. The world felt still. When I walked off the terrace, a cluster of veterans called out, "Captain Cole, ma'am." I saluted once crisp. They returned the gesture with soft eyes and weathered hands. On the sidewalk, my phone buzzed repeatedly. Messages from people I had not heard from in years. Classmates, neighbors, distant cousins. "Elena saw you on the live stream. Proud of you." The clip spread faster than I expected, not because I did anything dramatic, but because quiet truth travels farther than noise. Gerald stormed down the steps, his coat whipping behind him. He did not speak to me. He grabbed Tyler's arm and shoved through the crowd. People stepped away, uninterested in making space for his anger. My mother stayed behind, speaking softly to Logan about the flowers planted near the memorial, holding her purse with both hands like she was afraid of dropping something fragile. When the crowd thinned, I stood at the edge of the memorial and watched flags rise and fall. A breeze moved across the stone names, and the sunlight bounced off the river in thin shards of gold. Truth did not need to scream. Revenge through truth was quieter than I imagined. No grand speeches, no dramatic confrontations, just a community that saw a record that stood, and a moment where dignity eclipsed everything that tried to erase it. Logan took my hand, ready to go home. I nodded. As we walked away, a young private jogged up. "Ma'am, permission to speak freely. Granted. Thank you for showing us we do not have to shout to be heard." He saluted and left. My throat tightened. For a second, the world blurred, but I kept walking, coin in my pocket, steps measured, shoulders loose. I did not need to win in someone else's arena. The truth had already spoken, and the entire community witnessed it. Revenge through truth. The cleanest kind. The kind that leaves no ash, only light. Layer, hidden naturally at the end. Sometimes the purest justice is quiet justice. Sometimes silent revenge is letting truth stand on a stage by itself until respect returns. If you have ever reclaimed respect this way, your story matters too. A week after Veterans Day, Richmond felt colder, the kind of dry cold that makes leaves crack when you step on them. Logan and I walked past the James River overlook, where the water moved like dull glass under winter light. My phone buzzed with a message from a friend who worked at the VFW hall. Gerald's name was removed from the speaking calendar for the next 12 months. Veterans here did not take kindly to someone who mocked a soldier in uniform, especially in front of witnesses. The hall posted new guidelines about respect and conduct, quoting no names, but everyone knew. It was not revenge that roared. It was revenge that hummed quietly, like a closed door. A few days later, a neighbor sent me a scan of the church bulletin. The pastor had required a written apology from Gerald to be printed on the back page. The wording was stiff and formal, clearly proofed by someone who did not trust him to soften his ego. I regret my comments made toward a member of our congregation who is a decorated service member. I recognize the hurt I caused. I offer sincere apology. It was not warm, it was not affectionate, but it was public and permanent. I did not smile, just read it once and put my phone back in my coat pocket. My mother texted me after the bulletin came out. "Thank you for not humiliating him further." I answered simply. Truth humiliated him enough. That same evening, I heard that the State Bar Association quietly suspended Gerald's mentorship program. Not disbarred, not scandal splashed on headlines, just a 1-year removal from the list of respected mentors. Conduct unbecoming the official note read a phrase that seemed to carry its own quiet judgment. He told people the board overreacted. People pretended to believe him. I no longer cared either way. When I drove to the store for groceries the next morning, a man outside the entrance noticed the bumper sticker on my car that said, "Signal Corps." He held the door open and nodded. "Thank you for your service, Captain." Simple, steady words. I returned the nod. That meant more than any speech. At home, I went through my bank alerts and sent a Zelle payment of 1 cent to Tyler. The memo said, "For fact-checking medals." It was petty and a little wicked, and it made me laugh. An hour later, he blocked me. Fair enough. Around noon, Marcus called. He was in town on short leave and asked if he could stop by. We sat on the back porch with mugs of hot chocolate, the sky pale and quiet. He slid a small cloth patch across the table, the kind sewn inside a jacket barely seen by anyone. For the captain who kept us talking, he said, "No medals, no ceremony, just a memory sewn into fabric." I held it between my fingers, the threads warm from his hand. "I keep seeing your father's face when I saluted," he said. The entire room froze. I guess some people learn too late that respect is not optional. I told him I did not want to spend my life replaying it. He understood. "That is why this patch is small," he said. "Valor does not need to scream." When he left, Logan wrapped his arms around me from behind and rested his chin on my shoulder. "Proud of you," he said, "not because of the salute, because you stayed kind." I was not sure if kindness was the right word, but I let it sit. That night, we walked along the James River again as city lights blinked across the water. The challenge coin was in my coat pocket. I rolled it between my fingers like a stone you skip across a pond. I realized I did not need to prove anything anymore, not to them, not to anyone. Some nights healing felt quiet like the hush of river water moving past stones that do not care about old wounds. When we returned to the house, a padded envelope sat on the porch. Oh, the handwriting was unmistakably Gerald's, rigid and precise. I stared at it for a long moment. Logan offered to throw it away, but I shook my head. I took it inside, set it on my desk, and opened the top drawer. Inside was the folder holding every ugly message, every email, every screenshot I once collected to defend myself. I laid the envelope beside the folder and closed the drawer without reading a word. Not out of fear, out of freedom. Some things do not need to be opened to be finished. A few days later, my mother asked if we could meet for lunch. We sat at a small cafe near the canal, the kind that serves soup with too many crackers. She apologized again, no excuses this time. She said she stayed silent too long because she was raised to keep the peace. I told her peace without truth was just quiet cruelty. She nodded and cried into her napkin. I did not hug her, but I did not walk away. Healing is not a switch. It is steps on gravel. That afternoon, I took the challenge coin and the patch to a small cedar box where I kept things that mattered. Logan carved my initials into the lid. When I closed it, the click sounded like the end of a long note. By December, the viral video had faded. Life returned to groceries, laundry, morning coffee, the faint hum of ordinary days. Sometimes neighbors still mentioned the salute. Sometimes older veterans nodded when they saw my uniform. But mostly the world moved forward, and I let it. One night near Christmas, I saw Gerald walking alone outside the church after a community dinner. His shoulders sagged under a heavy coat. He looked smaller, not physically, but in presence. He saw me but did not approach. I walked past him without anger. Justice had already been delivered by his own actions. Revenge without hate is simply truth allowed to breathe. And truth had breathed deeply. In January, I stood on the riverbank again and watched thin sheets of ice drift along the surface. The sky was a clear winter blue. I whispered thank you to no one in particular. Maybe to the girl I used to be who believed silence was strength. Maybe to the woman I finally became, who learned that quiet justice is stronger than any shout. If someone ever tried to erase me again, I knew I would not bend. I would stand straight, speak calm, and let the truth walk beside me like a shadow of steel. If this story touches someone out there who has tasted betrayal or humiliation from family, I hope they know they are not alone. Healing can be slow, but it arrives. Respect can be stolen, but also reclaimed. Sometimes justice comes as a loud verdict. Sometimes it comes as a folded bulletin, a closed door, a patch in a box. Sometimes it comes simply as the day you no longer flinch where you used to. If you have ever stood your ground this way, your story counts. Quiet justice is still justice. Silent revenge still rewrites the ending. Truth and closure can be calm as river water. Reclaiming respect is a lesson in betrayal and a promise of peace. Tell your moment. Someone needs to hear it.